Good afternoon. Let me just fix, there's a little bit of an echo here. And the echo is me. Today we're dealing with Yom Hashoah a little bit here, and not a little bit. And so I wanted to remember this particular day, take a few minutes. It's also known as Holocaust Remembrance Day. And so I wanted to take a few minutes here in light of that um, and just bring that up. Um, Now, again, timing is everything, and so I'm here in the United States, but I wanted to take a few minutes to remember the Holocaust and to pull a few lessons from it, and to pull lessons that are meaningful to me from the Holocaust. Now, this isn't a message. This isn't a normal Wednesday night. This is an attempt to keep track of a very uh, dark time in human history, but not the first dark time in human history. Now, let me begin by pointing out that not only Jews died under the Nazis, Gypsies, Slavs, and then even the soldiers that were involved died under the barbarism of fighting the barbarism related to the Nazi regime. And so I'd be remiss in acting as though Jewish people were the only ones who died. But I can say this: Jewish people were uniquely targeted to the point that even those Jewish people who had come to uh, believe in things that were not normative Judaism were picked out, singled out, and killed. That would include Jews that entered the German Lutheran Church. They were as much at risk. It's often forgotten that many individuals who were Jews who believed in, or at least voiced a belief in Jesus Christ, died right alongside Jews who were atheists, right alongside Jews who were very rigid in their practice of Judaism, and they died because they were Jews. So I want to take a few minutes and draw a few lessons here and things that are important to me, uh, and touch upon my experience growing up as a diaspora Jew uh, after 1940. I didn't come over here right after the Holocaust. I didn't live during the Holocaust. Don't let the beard fool you. But yet, it was equally touched by it. First of all, I want to make a point about the Jewish people. The Jewish people are not necessarily better than everyone you'd meet on the street. I can introduce you to not nice Jewish people. I could introduce you to not nice Gentile people. Um, Jewish people are not necessarily inherently more spiritual. In fact, many of my countrymen are not very spiritual at all. I grew up with a father who is debating the existence of God to this day. I wouldn't call him a religious man. I wouldn't call him a spiritual man in the sense of being a clear believer in the tenets of Judaism in a very formal manner at all. He does what he does because he is indeed a Jew, and he recognizes himself as a Jew the same way that I do. The Jewish people have a mission. They have a divine mission. Uh, Paul talks about this in terms of the advantage of the Jew. I'll mention the advantage of the Jew and what's happened to that advantage, and then I will pull some important lessons out. But I want to pull something out of Romans chapter 3, verse 1. Now, I'm going to take some time to pray because prayer needs to be a part of things. And if this comes off overly theological, is because that is the way I view the world. I view history as a divine narrative in which a sovereign God is at work in the background trying to be good out of the chaos that our fallen world has within it and we help produce. And so that is, to me, the connection. That is the basis for history. As a sovereign and good God tries to work out his plans in a fallen world with moral agents that are very much opposed to his plans, whether they realize it or not. Paul, writing as a Jew about Jews, says, what advantage has the Jew? Notice he doesn't say the Israelite, he says the Jew. That's for those that want to make the Jewish people and Israelites two separate groups of people. So as far as Paul is concerned, the people he is discussing are the Jewish people here. They're not some other people. Or what is the profit of circumcision? Much in every way, because to them were entrusted the oracles of God. But what if some did not believe? Will their unbelief make the faithfulness of God without effect? Certainly not. Let God be true and every man a liar. Paul's point is that the Jewish people had a tremendous advantage in that God entered into covenant with him, and through that covenant, entrusted to them the sacred writings that some call the Old Testament. The Older Testament is a much better term, and I wish more Christians use it. It's not old, it is not obsolete, it is older, and it is the beginning of the narrative. But it is not obsolete. And so the Older Testament, or Jewish scriptures, is a better term. And God gave that to the Jewish people. And one of their great missions was to bring that forward. And they preserved the Hebrew texts. Who do you think the reformers studied Hebrew under? Well, Luther studied a lot of his Hebrew under the rabbis. And texts were preserved. And your King James is taken from the Ben Asher text, which was preserved by Jewish people. And so when you open a Bible at all, you're opening a book that was preserved by the Jewish people, because that was one of the purposes that God has for the Jewish people, was to bring forward the scriptures and to preserve the oracles of God, which were committed to them. The other purpose is to bring forth, or to be the conduit, the channel for the living word, just as well as for the written word. Does that mean every Jewish person believed the scriptures he had received? No. My father is not a strict believer in the Jewish Tanakh. Does that mean that the Jewish people as a whole were entrusted with this great treasure of the word? Yes. Does that mean indeed they were the channel for Jesus? Yes. Their unbelief or belief as an individual Jewish person in the scriptures does not change the fact that those things were entrusted. One might say, why? Well, who am I to know the mind of God? But I can know this. If there's one trait that has often been associated in my family, and I bet would show up in a lot of Jewish families, it would be that of tenacity. The downside of tenacity is stubbornness, and God does seem to note a certain amount of stiff-neckedness that is possible within the Jewish character. The positive side is tenacity, and the Jewish people are here to this day through God's working and through his working using their tenacity as a tool. And so as I'm reflecting on Yom Hashoah, or Holocaust Day, and I'm reflecting upon the horrible thing the Jewish people went through, I reflect on the fact that God indeed has a purpose and had a purpose for them. And so I am sitting here this day as a child that comes out of that purpose, as a descendant of those who were given the oracles of God and through whom Messiah came. Uniquely, I believe in the Messiah that was sent to my people. But the question that Christians always have is, what does this mean to me? How does this affect our churches? How does this affect me as a non-Jewish follower of Jesus? Does this have any meaning at all? Well, first of all, I'm going to take us to Lamentations. I think more and more I'm being impressed by the fact that God did create a response in the Bible to the great evil that is contained within our world. That response is not to question his goodness, not to question his sovereignty, but to use the vehicle of lament as a means of expressing our deep sorrow and our pleading with Him to display His goodness in the midst of those horrible things that produce that sorrow. Lament is the tool that God has given humankind by which they may address Him over the things that grieve the heart and soul and destroy our world. And God created an entire book of lament called Lamentations. And it's in lament that we find these words. 19. Remembering my affliction and roaming, the wormwood and gall my soul still remembers and sinks within me. This I recall to my mind. Therefore I have hope, through the Lord's mercies we are not consumed because of His compassion, because His compassions fail not. They are new every morning. Great is thy faithfulness. Jeremiah is reflecting upon the horrible state that Jerusalem is in as it is under the crushing hand of Babylon and is destroyed, and writes Lamentations, a time that is dark, a time that was dark for the Jewish people. And in the midst of that, he brings to mind that in the darkest night, there is still the light of God's goodness. Was that seen during the Holocaust? It was seen in the righteous Gentiles who hid Jews at the expense of their own families. Families like the Ten Booms, of which most died, but Cora Ten Boom gave great testimony to the love of God in the midst of the terror of evil. And in the midst of that, she managed to have her family, she managed to come out of a situation due to the fact that her family hid those Jewish people. They did what was right. They did what was honorable and what was good at great cost to themselves. Were there Gentiles like that who hid Jews, who believed they had a debt to the Jewish people? Yes, there were. And many suffered alongside them, and some did not. But beyond that, God's mercies were there. I'm sitting here because my family went in one direction instead of the other. By the way, they had no way of knowing that they would come out of that with many of them surviving. Not all, but enough. Many Jewish people ask, why God? The problem of evil was a big problem for me as I debated my father about whether a good God really exists or didn't exist, whether he was there or wasn't there, whether he could be trusted or couldn't be trusted. He could be trusted. The answer to the problem of evil is, one, God did not create evil. Evil is the absence of God. And two, God's mercies still are there, even in the midst of great darkness. I want to take a few minutes and pray for my people who desperately still need the hope of the fullness of God's great mercy. All we like sheep have gone astray, and every one of us has turned to his own way, and the Lord has laid upon him, Messiah, the iniquity of us all. We all are in great need, being born into a darkened world with darkness within ourselves, if we're honest. We do not shine the way we should shine. We do not shine consistently, and we do not shine brightly. And so I want to take a few minutes. Was this the most thought together message? No, these are reflections. These are cup of coffee reflections. These are fireside chat reflections. This wasn't meant to be a service. I don't come to you as the pastor of your church doing a Holocaust Remembrance Day. I come to you as a Jewish person who believes in Messiah, who is convinced that God is still good, The death of those Jewish people under such evil must be remembered. The death of others who died must be considered. And lament is a vehicle the scriptures give us to consider sad things and a good God at the same time. God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, was this brilliantly constructed? No. Will it get grave YouTube reviews? Maybe not. Is it worthwhile to remember the things that man can do to man, especially without you guiding the heart of man? Yes, it is. Lord, my Jewish people must learn to separate the Holocaust from Jesus, from Yeshua, a son of David, a son of Abraham. They need to understand that his heart, as he lamented over Jerusalem, was never that these things should be. That there is no connection between a genuine faith in Jesus, Yeshua, as the son of David and son of Abraham, and a hatred for the sons of Abraham, the Jew, who has had a great advantage and been the source of blessing and will be again. Not only spiritual blessing, but the Jew continues to be a source of blessing to the world, whether the world likes it or not, and whether it's done perfectly or not. Help them separate the message of peace and love, the message of repentance, and the message of the fact that God truly forgives, not because we wish he would, not because we think we're good enough to bribe him with our good works, not because we do enough nice things or even mitzvot, but because he is good and has created a means of atonement, which he himself explains in the Torah. Allow them to see that the hand is still extended and that God was in the Holocaust, weeping, providing those individuals into their paths of noble heart who hid some, and seeing some families, even though others were lost through the Holocaust, so that their descendants could come to America and have a greater freedom. Allow them to see the hand of God as they remember the horror of the Holocaust. For those who are followers of Jesus and the church, may they never ever again wander down the path of triumphalism, the evil that says that God is through with his ancient people on the basis of their lack of goodness. For if God went by our goodness, either before we accepted Jesus or after, he would have been through with all of us and would be through with all of us. Allow them to reject anti-Semitism in all of its forms. And allow them to see the need that is out there for the Jewish people. Well, here's a few thoughts that I hadn't even planned much for today. Maybe an outline would have been better. Does the Jew have an advantage? Yes, the Jew had a purpose and has a purpose in the plan of God. Is the Jew perfect? No, and neither is the Gentile. Is Jesus the solution for Jew and Gentile? Yes. Is God still in the redemption business? Yes. God allowed many to survive. He will allow many to spiritually survive. Thank you for the time. I don't know what this will produce, but I pray that the prayer and reflection on the Word of God will be of value. There is lament because there is evil. There is lament to a God who is good because he is good. Thank you for the time.